You picture the North Pole and the South Pole as the same place, twice, frozen, white, impossibly far away. Somewhere polar bears live, somewhere Santa lives, somewhere it never stops snowing. But one of those poles is a floating skin of sea ice with no ground underneath it at all. The other is a continent and one of the highest, driest, and strangest landmasses on Earth. So how can two places at opposite ends of the same frozen planet be built from completely different materials? Start with the basics. The Arctic is an ocean, the Antarctic is land. Humans didn't even lay eyes on that land until 1820, less than 200 years ago, which makes Antarctica the most recently discovered continent on the planet. And even now, only a tiny fraction of humanity has ever set foot past its coastline. That's why scientists still describe it as the oldest, least understood landmass on Earth, not because it's ancient in age, but because it's ancient in mystery. Size tells its own story. Antarctica covers about 14 million square kilometers. That's larger than the United States and Canada combined, just barely smaller than Russia. 97% of it sits under ice. The Arctic, by contrast, is almost entirely water, with only a thin rim of land scattered around its edges. 90% of all the ice on Earth sits on top of Antarctica. And because that ice is frozen fresh water, roughly 70% of the planet's fresh water is locked inside a single continent at the bottom of the world. Now here's where it gets strange. Both poles are cold, but they are not cold in the same way. Antarctica averages around negative 50 degrees Celsius. The Arctic averages around negative 18. That's not a small gap. It's the difference between brutal and almost survivable. Why would one frozen place be nearly 3 times colder than the other? Two reasons, and neither one is obvious. The first is elevation. The Arctic sits at sea level because it's mostly ocean. Antarctica sits on average 2,000 meters above sea level because the ice itself has piled up into a frozen plateau. Higher elevation means thinner air, and thinner air holds less heat. The second reason is water movement. The Arctic Ocean connects directly to the Atlantic and the Pacific, so warm currents from the equator flow straight into it. Antarctica has no such lifeline. A single enormous ring of freezing current, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, spins endlessly around the continent, sealing it off from any warm water trying to get in. It's less like a wall and more like a moat, one that never lets outside heat cross the border. That isolation produced the coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth, negative 93. 2 degrees Celsius measured on the Antarctic plateau. Glaciologist Ted Scambos and his team confirmed the reading using satellite data in 2013, and at that temperature, carbon dioxide itself would freeze solid into dry ice. Try to imagine standing somewhere cold enough to freeze the air you're breathing out, because the Arctic isn't nearly that extreme. It can support life the way land usually does. There's vegetation, moss, lichen, even small trees near its edges, which supports grazing animals, which supports predators. That's how you get the Arctic's most famous resident, the polar bear, the largest land carnivore alive, standing up to 3 meters tall and weighing over 500 kilograms. Reindeer graze there too, so do Arctic wolves and Arctic foxes, both bleached white to disappear into the snow, and musk oxen built like shaggy Ice Age leftovers. The surrounding seas add whales and seals to the list. Antarctica has none of that. No moss to speak of, no soil worth mentioning, no mammals living on the land at all. The closest thing to a native land animal is a bird, the penguin. Ask yourself why a place that's technically less deadly by some measures still ends up completely empty of land life, while the harsher sounding Arctic is full of it. The answer is simple. Without plants, there's no food chain to build on. The ocean around Antarctica still teems with whales and seals because water insulates life in a way frozen rock never can. Ownership follows the same divide. The Arctic's scattered land belongs to 8 different countries: the United States, Canada, Denmark, Iceland, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Russia. Antarctica belongs to no one. In 1959, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, agreeing that the continent belongs to humanity collectively, not to any single flag. As a result, ordinary travel into the interior isn't allowed. Only approved scientific research gets through. Tourists can skirt the coastline, but the deep interior stays sealed, protected from contamination by design. Despite that isolation, the two poles still share a few strange things in common. Both experience polar day and polar night, 6 unbroken months of light, followed by 6 unbroken months of darkness, caused by the tilt of Earth's axis. Stand exactly at either pole, and your entire year becomes one single day and one single night. And both poles produce the aurora at the same moment every time. Solar particles get pulled in by Earth's magnetic field and funneled symmetrically toward both ends of the planet. So whenever the northern lights ignite, the southern lights are igniting too. A planet lighting up at both tips simultaneously, whether anyone happens to be watching or not. 200 years of exploration has turned up things nobody expected under that ice. Antarctica holds roughly 48,000 recovered meteorites, more than anywhere else on Earth. Not because more meteorites fall there, but because the slow crawl of glacial ice gathers them together over centuries, concentrating scattered debris into a handful of collection zones. Researchers have also pulled up fossils of tropical plants and even dinosaur bones out of a continent now buried under ice, proof that Antarctica once sat somewhere warmer before continental drift dragged it to the bottom of the planet. In 1908, explorer Ernest Shackleton left crates of whiskey behind on the ice, meant for his own expedition. They were recovered more than a century later, perfectly preserved by the cold, and now sit in a New Zealand museum. Then there's the wildlife that shouldn't be that big, a sea worm the size of a small dog. Sea spiders more than 30 centimeters across, when their relatives elsewhere top out at 1 centimeter, shrimp-like amphipods that would fit in your palm anywhere else on Earth, growing to over 10 centimeters in Antarctic waters. Squid twice the size of their Arctic cousins. A jellyfish with tentacles reported to stretch 40 meters. One of the longest living creatures ever documented. Why does the cold produce giants instead of stunting everything the way you'd expect? Marine biologists Guy Chappell and Lloyd Peck answered that question in a 1999 study published in Nature. Cold water holds more dissolved oxygen than warm water, and more available oxygen lets marine creatures grow far larger than their warm water relatives ever could. The same principle, they argued, that let prehistoric insects and reptiles reach enormous sizes when Earth's atmosphere carried more oxygen than it does now. Fewer predators help too. With so little competition to eat them or be eaten by them, these creatures simply never stop growing. The strangest discovery of all sits far below the surface. We need more than 150 lakes hidden completely beneath the ice, sealed off from sunlight and from air. The largest is Lake Vostok, buried under nearly 4 kilometers of ice near the Russian research station of the same name. Soviet geographer Andrei Kapitsa first proposed its existence back in 1959, simply by noticing that some patches of the ice sheet sat unusually flat, a flatness that could only be explained by still water resting underneath. Ice sheets mirror whatever lies beneath them. Mountains push the surface up. Lakes let it settle flat. That ice has sealed Lake Vostok shut for an estimated 30 million years, meaning anything alive down there has been isolated from the rest of the planet since long before humans existed. A Russian team began drilling toward it in 1998. By 2011, they'd closed to within 100 meters of the water and confirmed it was still liquid, kept unfrozen by pressure and geothermal heat, complete with detectable tides. Microbes turned up in the ice just above the lake. Then the drill jammed. Other nations pushed for a pause, warning that breaking through could contaminate an ecosystem that had been sealed for 30 million years, or release something nobody was prepared to identify. Measurements of the lake's water showed unusually high oxygen levels, the exact condition that produces oversized creatures everywhere else in Antarctica. Russia held off for a few years, then resumed drilling in 2015. What they eventually found, if anything, has never been made public. So the next time someone shows you a photo of ice and says, the poles, ask them which one they mean. One is an ocean wearing a mask of frozen water, home to bears, wolves, and 8 flags. The other is a lost continent, hiding oceans of trapped fresh water, oversized life, and a lake that hasn't seen daylight in 30 million years. They look like the same frozen postcard. They are not even the same kind of place.